Next, here's another recording from Blackpool Talking Newspapers, this time an interview with Sir Terry Wogan.
Hi, it's Ross here, and today I'm speaking to the legend that is Sir Terry Wogan. Sir Michael Terry Wogan, KBA DL, born in Limerick, Ireland in 1938. Thank you for agreeing to speak to me today.
It's a great pleasure. I'm delighted to do.
When you left college, you had a brief career working for the Royal Bank of Ireland. Did you enjoy working in a bank?
Well, I didn't go to college because, quite frankly, I felt that my parents had spent enough money on my education. And I just applied to a bank and got a job with a little bank called the Royal Bank of Ireland. And I worked there for about 4 years, and I really had a very happy time until I answered an ad in the newspaper and became a radio announcer.
You then joined the National Broadcaster of Ireland, the RTE, as a newsreader and announcer. Had it always been your ambition to work in the media?
No, not really, although I've been an enormous fan of radio since a little chap in Limerick. I was probably the only one of my peers there who was listening to BBC, because the rest of them were listening to Radio Éireann, which is the Irish national broadcaster. But I always listened to the Light programme. So, you know, Much Binding in the Marsh and Take It From Here and then Dick Barton, Special Agent, and then the Goons. And so, you know, when I eventually came to England to work, it wasn't as a complete stranger. I did grasp the essentials of British life.
I believe that you worked on Radio 1 from its start in 1967. What was it like in the early years?
Well, I mean, I had my photograph taken with all the Radio 1 rapscallions in 1967 in that wonderful church just outside the BBC. So that's a kind of historic picture of all of us together. Most of them were refugees from the sunken pirates, who had been sunken by the government because they were too popular and weren't paying any money to anybody. And so BBC very shrewdly employed the best of them, and whether you could call it shrewdness or not, also people like me and Jimmy Young, who came from Radio Luxembourg, and a couple of others who were not necessarily pirates, but the bulk of people there were in fact ex-pirates. And I started on Late Night Extra, which was a news and music program, and I used to fly across from Dublin to do that for a couple of days a week. And then they offered me the afternoon show, which was on Radio 1 and 2.
In April 1972, you first presented The Breakfast Show on BBC Radio 2. Could you ever dare to dream how popular this show would become over the years?
Well, did you say 1932?
1972.
Because that's what it feels like. But no, I took over from John Dunn, who was a terrific and very popular broadcaster, and no longer with us, I'm afraid, but a really lovely guy. So, I mean, I took over, and it sort of grew. Obviously, for most networks, the most important show is the breakfast show. It's the flagship. It's the show which leads to bigger audiences. If you get the biggest audience for the morning show, then the networks get the biggest audience. I mean, Chris Evans, who took over from me, he's got a great audience, and Radio 2 benefits from that, you know. Yeah. But obviously, if you get it wrong, it's the end. But you know, when you're very young, I took a chance coming across from Ireland. I was a pretty popular broadcaster in Ireland at the time, doing television and radio. And it was a chance I took coming over to England to work for the BBC with my wife and one little son. And it never occurred to me that I might be sent back to Ireland with my tail between my legs. And luckily for me, it didn't happen. So I suppose went from strength to strength. I was an experienced broadcaster because I'd done 8 years on Irish radio and television, so I knew what I was doing. And when I came across first, I would listen to Radio 1 and 2, and all I could hear was sycophancy. All I could hear was people saying, that's a wonderful show, terrific, thank you for presenting. And, I kind of realized that people are not like that to their friends. They send up their friends. They don't, or jeer them. They don't necessarily spend their time complimenting them. So I tried to create a kind of atmosphere of mutual gentle insult, really. And that's the way it kind of worked out.
In 1978, you had a hit record with your version of the Floral Dance. What decided you to make this record?
Well, thank you for calling it a hit. But, I remember singing it on Top of the Pops, because it was at around about number 11 or whatever it was in the top 20. That's when they had a top 20. And I came on and started singing it and throwing flowers to the young people who were there, and they flung them back at me. But as far as the song goes, it was just the Brighouse in Maastricht had a huge hit with it, and I started to sing along with it on the radio because my father used to sing it in the bathroom when he was shaving, so I knew the words. And then somebody had the bright idea that why don't I do a record? Well, whether that was a bright idea or not is for music lovers to decide. But, I had great fun with that, and people never forget it, which is a pity.
In 1984, you left radio and pursued a full-time career in television. How did you find the transition from radio to television?
Well, I'd done a lot of television in Ireland, and I had done a lot of television in Britain. I had done an enormously successful series called Blankety Blank, and various other beauty contests, which I wasn't so good at. And so, I wasn't a stranger to television. I knew what I was doing. It's a completely different medium. Television. Radio, you're your own master because you're in charge of your own timing and your own, you don't have to move to certain spots to hit the light. And you're not at the behest of directors and producers and all the rest of it. So I always found radio a much more amenable medium for me. But the television was no problem, and we had an enormous 8.5 years. It was the thing to remember about it is that it was live, which you don't get now. So it was a live talk show, and therefore with the attendant dangers of various people who wouldn't speak or came on having benefited from substances that I had not benefited from myself, and perhaps an excess of alcohol. And so, it was a varied program, let me put it that way. And I really had a wonderful time doing it. And we did it for 8.5 years. And then I could easily, when that finished, I could easily have ended up on Countdown. But luckily for me, the BBC wanted me back on the radio. Yeah. So I came back to restart the morning radio show and re-established my constituency, and it grew from there. And so I've had two bites of the cherries. Yeah. And sometimes when I think about it, it was a good thing that I didn't continue just doing the radio without the 8-year break for the talk show. Because I don't think I would have lasted on the radio as long as I did.
Your chat show, Wogan, attracted many massive film stars. However, two of the most memorable interviews were probably those of George Best and David Icke. Can you recall the famous put-down line you used to David when he claimed to be the Son of God?
Well, David has made a damn good living subsequently by claiming to be the Son of God or the Son of something. Or the fact that our leaders are really serpents, or whatever it is he believes. But, he also, I remember, wore turquoise, which he seemed to think was a kind of holy color. Yes, I think the put-down was that he said, oh, you see, they're laughing, the audience, when he said something. And I said, they're not laughing with you, they're laughing at you. And he's never really forgiven me for that. And it was a little harsh, to be honest. I regret that put down because it wasn't necessary. David was making a big enough idiot of himself as it was. But as I say, he's a big name on the circuit in America. So let's not knock him.
Yeah.
You can knock his foolish beliefs, but his success is terrific.
Our listeners may be aware that you are a keen golfer. However, I suspect not many will know that in 1981 you set a world record at the game. Can you tell us about that?
I can, but I mean, you're making me boast a lot now. But I shall try and make it low key. That was at Pro Celebrity Golf was a marvelous series. Well, I loved it because we used to be able to go, myself and my family, to wonderful places like Gleneagles and Turnberry, and I had the privilege of playing with the best golfers in the world. I played with all the best golfers in the world while I was there. Not one of them ever gave me a single tip, but I played with all those wonderful golfers. And we had one match where I think I was playing against a Trevor Brooking, who was playing with Lee Trevino, and I was playing with a man called Fuzzy Zeller, who had just won the Masters in America. And it came to the 18th green at Gleneagles, which is a huge green. I drove into a bush, which is just off the fairway. I then hit a shot from the bush onto the very edge of this huge green. I then sunk a putt from 33 yards, which was, and I think probably still is, the longest amateur putt ever seen on television. I think subsequently some professional upstart called Woods or something, whatever his name is, I think he sunk a longer one, But whenever Peter Alice is doing anything on television, he always drags my putt out for people to see. And to be honest, the kind of golf I'm playing at the moment is a bit embarrassing.
In January 1993, you returned to Radio 2 to present Wake Up to Wogan. It was reported in 2005 you had an audience of 8 million. What do you think made this programme so successful? Well,
the public were used to me. The thing to remember is that it was only a 2-hour programme, so most of the jocks who were presenting breakfast shows resented it enormously, but in a very kindly way, because it wasn't really a breakfast show. They were up from 5 o'clock. Look, Chris Evans is up at about 5 o'clock, starts about 6:30. I didn't start until 7:30 and only went on till 9:30, so we had a 2-hour show. And the thing about breakfast radio, and indeed breakfast television, which British television hasn't really cracked, is that it's an intimate medium. People don't listen to you for long periods in the early morning. They're half listening to you, but they need a familiar voice. You're a bit like the carpet in the living room or the kettle on the hob. You're just something familiar, something that when people get up in the morning and they're not feeling all that good, you're kind of there, something to lean on. And I think that's the essence of the success.
For many years, you were the voice of the Eurovision Song Contest. Of all 100 of acts you saw, which one sticks in your mind from being the most bizarre, really?
They're all. One complements the other. The one that I kind of remember more clearly was one of the last ones I did, which was in Copenhagen. And the two presenters, because the presenters were always ridiculous. For some reason, European television companies seem to think that they have to make the presenters fall in love or sing to each other, which is ridiculous. And on this occasion in Copenhagen, the two presenters introduced each song in Danish and then in English rhyming couplets, like Shakespearean. And I thought that was the most foolish thing I've ever heard or seen in my life. And I refer to them as Dr. Death and the Tooth Fairy. And when I woke the following morning, it was to find most of Denmark was ready to take my head off, because most of Denmark was watching BBC Prime and instead of their own national television service, and they were listening to my commentary. And so, whenever I go to Copenhagen from now on, or from then on, I have to wear a paper bag over my head.
Despite all the criticism that it receives, what do you think makes the Eurovision Song Contest still so successful after 58 years?
Well, in the early stages when I was doing it, people were making criticism of its lack of musical content. And, that's completely missing the point. And certainly as far as the Europeans are concerned, it's a feast of fine music.
Yes.
As far as we're concerned, it's rubbish. But it's great rubbish. There's something to be said for kitsch and bling and foolishness on the television. It doesn't all have to be wonderfully musical and factual. And the whole thing about the Eurovision is that it's a magnificent piece of television.
Yes.
You watch it this year, or next year. Is it next year? Yeah, next year. And you'll see 7 hours, 3.5 hours of wonderful production.
Yeah, it's a show. It's a show.
Magnificent sets. You never see a floor manager running across the set. And there's loads of instruments and things have to be moved and sets have to be changed. It's a perfect piece of light entertainment television, apart from the music.
Between 1979 and 1983, you presented Blankety Blank before handing over the reins to the late Les Dawson. A running joke during the programme was the poor quality of the prizes on offer. What do you think was the worst prize ever given?
Oh, well, the whole point about it was the terrible prizes. That was, again, the same principle as the Eurovision Song Contest. It's just the taking part that counts, because there's no point winning the prizes. And it's the same with the Eurovision Song Contest. Who remembers the winning song? 5 minutes after it's been won, nobody can remember the winning song. And it's the same thing with Blankety Blank. The essence of it all were the really cheap prizes. And that was because the BBC can't be seen to give away a load of money and big prizes. So I have one of them at the moment. I have a Blankety Blank checkbook and pen, which is in an honoured place here, sitting in front of me even as I speak. And, we had a star prize once, which was a weekend in Reykjavik. and other prizes like plastic bicycles. And I remember a mug tree. A mug tree. That was the prize.
It sounds like a good prize. I think I'd like the checkbook. The checkbook sounds good. Since 1980, you presented the annual Children in Need appeal, which has raised countless millions of pounds for children's good causes. Of all the television and radio programmes you've been involved with, does this give you the most pride and satisfaction?
Oh, you can imagine, of course it does. It's the most important thing I've ever done anywhere, but certainly on television and radio. We've raised the British public have donated over £600 million since I started this in 1980. And on that night in 1980, we made $1 million, which was extraordinary for them, considering that the BBC wasn't terribly sure whether they wanted to do it or not. And now it's gone from strength to strength. And last year was a record breaker. Last year we made more money on the night than ever before, which, in view of the fact that the British public had just given $25 million for the Philippines disaster, was extraordinary. And I've just seen the latest figure, we made $50 million last year. So that's an enormous amount of money to be able to distribute among Britain's underprivileged and sick children.
You presented so many programmes on TV and radio, and you've achieved so much during your career. Do you still have any unfulfilled ambitions you want to achieve?
I've never had any tremendous ambitions. I've tended to drift through my career, and just I've only ever done things that have been easy for me. I've never been any good at making an effort. So I've no capacity for taking pains. I tend to make things up as I go along. And I've never worried, when I was doing the talk show, I never really worried too much about research and all that kind of thing, because then it can be really wearing if you start to take it too seriously. It's only the television. It's only the radio,
Have you ever fancied appearing on Strictly Come Dancing or I'm a Celebrity?
No, I've been invited. I've done a little bit on Strictly Come Dancing because we did it for Children in Need. But having done that, not likely. I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. I mean, it's for an old geezer like me, it'd be the death of me. The amount of rehearsal and dancing you'd have to do. It's a killer. It's a wonderful and tremendously popular show, and we're going to miss the fact that dear old Brucey isn't doing it anymore.
Sir Terry Wogan, the Togmeister, thank you so much for sparing some of your valuable time to speak to me today.
It's a privilege, and thank you for asking me. God bless. Bye-bye.
Well, that was Sir Terry Wogan. Thanks to Blackpool Talking News for that recording. I don't know how many of you have heard of Margaret Patton. She used to feature on Sound Around a lot with her recipes. I have an article here about microwaves and microwave cooking. It's quite a long article, so I'll just feature parts of it. First of all, speaking for myself, most of us thought the microwave was invented in about the 1970s. But Margaret says that's not so. Here's what she says about the invention of the microwave.
You know, thinking back over the history of microwave cookers, many people think that they were invented in the 1970s. Now, that's not the case at all. The idea of making use of microwaves to heat and cook food was conceived during the Second World War. Now, that is in the early 1940s, when research was being carried out on radar. In the late 1940s, the first microwave cooker was manufactured in America. Microwave cookers were originally used by the catering trade, but in 1955, the first domestic microwave cooker was introduced. And nowadays, of course, as you know, there are millions in use throughout the world.
I didn't know they were around when I was a boy. I'd never heard of them. In 1955, well. Anyway, she goes on to briefly explain next how the microwave works.
I think it's helpful to know how a microwave cooker really heats food. And really the principle is very simple. Microwaves are short length and very high frequency radio waves. These can penetrate through all materials, except metal. Now that is why microwave cookers are made of metal. The microwaves cannot penetrate through the sides of the cooker into the room outside. They're kept inside that metal container, the cooker. Heating and cooking food is done by the microwaves, which are emitted through a magnetron when the cooker is switched on and the door is shut. That's very important, remembering they only operate when the door is shut. And they beam through the food in all directions. The microwaves become absorbed by the food, and they cause the molecules of moisture, which is there in all food as well as liquid, to vibrate at a speed of well over 2,000 million times a second. Incredible figure. That is how the heat is generated and cooked within a very short time. Now, if all that sounds alarmingly technical, you just try rubbing your hands together very quickly and briskly. After a few moments, they begin to warm up, don't they? Now, you're creating the same vibrations, but certainly not 2,000 million a second, as in the average microwave. Now, several years ago, there were rumours that microwave cookers could be dangerous. Now, please, may I reassure you that these fears have proved groundless.
And Margaret goes on to tell us that when you buy a microwave, you don't need any special installation. It can be plugged into any domestic power point. Now, she goes on, she does have a lot of recipes about what you can cook in a microwave, but she's got a little feature here about what you can't do in a microwave. Listen to this.
Now, before you go shopping, a very important question to ask yourself, what can't I do in a microwave? I've given you an idea of what the various settings do, but what can you not assume you will be able to cook? You can't fry food. You mustn't fry food. That's shallow frying or deep frying. So that's quite out in a microwave cooker. But when a recipe says heat a little butter or margarine and toss the food in that, the correct cookery term is sautéing, and that can be done. I have purposely chosen one or two recipes in which it is done, so that I introduce it, but that is not frying. You can't boil eggs. For goodness sake, never try. They'll explode in a microwave cooker. Dishes like a Yorkshire pudding are not successful. Roast potatoes are not successful. Many people do make pastry. If you're proud of your pastry in an oven, then I would continue to bake it in an oven. It's possible to do it if you're short of time. And not everyone will agree with me, but I think unless you really are desperate for time, the oven is the best place for making pastry.
Here she explained the difference in cooking time from the conventional cooker to the microwave.
One point in which microwave cooking differs a lot from ordinary cooking of certain foods is when you increase or decrease individual amounts. Now, this is a question that a number of Sound Around listeners have raised. So let me try to explain this. If you cook one fillet of fish under a grill, you know from experience that that particular thickness of fish takes 5 minutes. But if somebody else comes in, so instead of your one fillet of fish, you're going to cook 2 fillets, or 3 fillets, or 4 fillets, and you can get them all arranged on that grill pan, you would still allow round about the same time, wouldn't you? There wouldn't be any difference. It would still be the 5 minutes cooking time. Well, that doesn't apply to microwave cooking. You may find that one thin fillet of fish takes 2 minutes on full power, plus 1 or 2 minutes standing time. Now, you add an extra fillet of fish, you have to increase the timing. It sounds complicated, but it's really quite simple. You increase the basic time by 30% for each extra person, or extra portion. One fillet takes 2 minutes, right? 2 fillets will take 2 minutes plus 30% of 2 minutes. So 30% of 2 minutes, that's 120 seconds, is 36 seconds. So 2 fillets takes 2 minutes, 36 seconds, or, to round it off, nearly 2 3/4 minutes. 3 fillets take 2 minutes plus 60%. That's 2 lots of 30. So 60% of 120 seconds, 72 seconds. So 3 fillets take about 3 1/4 minutes. 4 fillets take 2 minutes plus 3 times 30%, 90%. 90% of 120 seconds, 110 seconds. So 4 fillets take almost double the time of 1 fillet, just over 3 3/4 minutes of your setting the timer, just under 4 minutes. Standing time, well, they remain virtually the same. We'll have bacon for breakfast, shall we? And this is excellent from a microwave cooker. Now, if you want to absorb any of the fat from bacon, put a double thickness of slightly crumpled kitchen paper. If you have one thin layer of paper, it tends to stick to the bacon rashers onto a flat plate or dish. Don't forget, no metal rim around the dish. You can, of course, if you're not fussy about the fat, put the bacon straight onto the plate. Now, you've got the bacon rashers, and some people like to snip the bacon and the rind, if it's still there, to stop the rashers curling. I really don't bother about that if I'm in a hurry, but that's entirely up to you. Arrange the rashers flat, don't let them overlap, on the paper or the plate. And to keep your microwave nice and clean, I would just lay another piece of kitchen paper, kitchen roll, over the bacon rashers, and that prevents splattering. Set the control to full power, the timer, to 1 minute if you like bacon very underdone, 2 minutes if you like it very crispy. That's for 2 bacon rashers, and you know how to adjust that with more. And there you are. Delicious bacon will come out of your microwave cooker. Again, the minimum of washing up, and to go with that, you can make your tea, or your coffee, or your chocolate, whatever you have, in the microwave, in the cup, just blending the ingredients and putting those in. If you want bacon and egg, then you must leave out the kitchen paper because you want the bacon fat in which to cook the egg, and you can manage without any extra fat, because this is one of the beauties of microwave cooking, that you do cut down on fat quite appreciably. Very important these days when we're all trying to be not too lavish with fat. Well, you cook the 2 bacon rashers for about half a minute only. Now that means they're not really cooked, but you've got a little fat on the plate. And then you break 1 or 2 eggs into this fat. So it will have a fairly roomy plate, so you get them in. Now, a very special precaution. Take the tip of the knife and just feel where the yolk is and prick that twice with the knife. Now, you won't spoil the egg. It's extraordinary. You don't do that. Do it with the second egg. And then you allow 45 seconds more cooking for 1 egg, or about 1 to 1 1/4 minutes for 2 eggs. And there you have bacon and egg all ready.
Well, I'll end this article there for now. There's a lot more on the tapes of tips and recipes. It's an ordinary cassette tape. If any of you want a copy of the tape, you can let me know, and I can arrange to get some copies made. I've still got a tape copier at Infovision office. So if any of you want a copy of this Marguerite Patton tape, let me know. I don't know exactly when it was made, around about the 1990s, I think, so it's still fairly up to date. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting. I don't know if any of you have heard of Trevor Bayliss. He's the chap who invented the clockwork radio. This was a few years ago now, back in the late 90s, I think. It's just a ordinary portable radio, but instead of having batteries, it runs off a clockwork generator. I think it was originally designed for third world use, where people could have picked up radio stations but didn't have much access to batteries. Of course, it would also be useful in the desert or the Australian outback if you were there. You might be able to hear some radio, but just couldn't get your batteries. So, I don't know how many of them there are around. I don't think it sold well in this country, because people wouldn't have really wanted it, would they? But I've got one beside me now. It was passed on to me. Someone didn't want it anymore. So I'll try and describe it as best I can. It's about 12 inches long, 8 inches high, 5 inches wide. It's in a plastic case. It's got a speaker grill on the front. To the left of the speaker grill is a little plastic window so you can see the needle for tuning, because it's the old-fashioned dial. On the left-hand edge you've got two rotating knobs, one for tuning, one for volume, two slider switches for wave change and on-off. It has a telescopic aerial on top towards the left, a carrying handle on top as well. On the right-hand edge is the little handle for winding the radio. Okay, I'll give it a few turns now. Let's see what happens here. There we go. What have we got? I think that's radio 2. Turn the dial. Radio 3.
I think Dan will be role-playing the civilian...
And, of course, Radio 4.
So he'll be the one throwing the petrol bomb.
And it'll go on playing until the generator runs down, and it'll just then stop, of course, as you'll hear in a moment when it is there. Only give it a few turns.
Swimming pool installed, you see.
And there it is. It's stopped. It's also got shortwave, but I suppose it depends where you are. I can't pick up much around here on shortwave, but it's got shortwave as well. It's a mono radio. There are no headphone sockets, so it's just a straight radio, mono, FM, and the shortwave. Well, quite a good idea, you might say. Well, of course, once you bought it, there'd be no running costs. You'd just have to find the energy to wind it up. But it's got one or two drawbacks as far as I can see. On a full wind, which takes about a minute turning the handle, it'll run for only 30 minutes. So if you wanted your radio on all day to listen, you'd have to keep rewinding it every 30 minutes or so. So you couldn't hear a whole Omnibus of the Archers or a whole radio drama without interrupting your program. Because even though when it's running, you might wind it before it runs down, but you will still interrupt the program. You see, here it is. I'm going to turn the handle again, and it interrupts the program. So that's one little problem you'll have with it, having to wind it every 30 minutes and interrupting the program. It's a shame they didn't design it a little better. I mean, I don't know if this is the only model around. I don't even know if this is the one Trevor Bayliss himself made, or if it's someone else's make who copied his invention. I don't know what make it is. But say they designed it where you could turn the little handle without interrupting the radio. Just like when you wind a watch, you don't interrupt the watch's movement. Or on the old wind-up gramophone, you would turn the handle while the record was playing. You wouldn't interrupt the record at all. It's a shame they didn't design it that way, really, isn't it? Well, that's about all I can tell you about this little radio. As I said, I don't think there are many others around now. wouldn't think so. I just thought you might like to hear about it. Anyway, that's all I have for this edition of the magazine. I hope you've enjoyed listening to it. If you want to contact me at all, and please do if you've anything to say, I always like getting feedback, you can email me. My email address is keithdejersey, that's all one word, lowercase, KEITHDEJERSEY @btinternet.com. My telephone number home is 0208 805 6578, mobile 07887 507471. If you want to make any contributions, I can receive recordings on cassette, CD, minidisc, and the memory stick. So if you want to make any contributions, let me know, and you can always send them on to me, and I can feature them on the magazine. Anyway, I'll say bye for now till next time, and thank you for listening.